So thank you, CWNP, for allowing me to speak on the big stage. I've been really lucky. First of all, let me apologize. This is apparently the voice you get after spending a couple nights out with SEs. You sound like Batman, but more like Brown Man. But I've been really lucky to work with Ruckus with some really interesting and talented people. The Moes, GT Hills, the Marcus Burtons. I actually texted Marcus this morning. I said, Marcus, I'm going to go on the stage and do this. What do you think? And he sent me back a message, and he says, don't mess this up. If you do, I don't know you. Forever yours, Marcus Burton. So, that was really cringy, but really sweet at the same time. I am Canadian, so I would like to thank the CWNP for holding this conference the same week that Canada legalized marijuana. I feel like there's not a lot of work being done up there right now. I'm Christopher Mohammed. I work at the networking company that rhymes with fun, Ruckus Networks. I'm going to talk to you about the wonderful Internet of Things. And I've titled this IoT Transports. And I've lost I did find it. Choose Your Own Adventure. It's after some of my favorite books when I was younger, and still today. I hate to admit that. But let's get started. I've got 20 minutes. I got to do this before my ADHD kicks in, and same with my ADD, OTP, Element OP, and turrets. But you'll be lucky. They're probably all going to hit at the same time, let's be honest. So IoT transports is how we go about putting ones and zeros on the network, wherever that network may be. And there's so many different transports, all with their own specific use cases and designs. Some are good for short range. Some are good for long range, in your house, urban deployments, in your office, carrying large amounts of data, carrying small amounts of data. I get asked the question, which type of transport should I use? There's LoRa, Z-Wave, Zigbee, BLE, to name a few, and each has their own uses. Sometimes you're limited by the equipment that you're going to install. Sometimes you get to choose the equipment that you're going to install. But let's be honest, most of the time you're just told what the equipment is you're going to install. So which IoT transports to use? With IoT transports, really the idea here is just learn the idea behind the transports and then apply them to your scenario. Each have advantages, and given the deployment, you can work in or out of your favor. So let's talk about the ideas behind some of them, and you can make decisions on your own, which ones might be right for your deployment. Also, I'm super excited. The CWNP just announced the new exam that they're going to be working on for IoT transports, and as well as scripting, which is how we actually going to interconnect these devices. So like all crappy presentations, I'm going to start with statistics or predictions to get you interested in the topic. Apparently 75 billion devices will be connected by 2025. That's outstanding. However, it's really close in years to me. In 2025, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be in the twilight of my life. I don't know if you guys know this, but where I live in Canada, our life expectancy is really short. Even if we have free healthcare. $3 trillion in IoT spending by 2025. Fantastic, let's get that money. I don't know if that's American dollars. I'm assuming so, because if it was Canadian, it'd probably be about 9 trillion Canadian pesos. And by my own prediction, in 2075, we're going to have the 323rd reptilianth device shipped. It's quite incredible. The idea here is that we're throwing a lot of numbers and stats at IoT. And every time I look, we seem to be getting alternative facts. One day it is X amount, and the next day is Y amount. I think we can assume that there's going to be a lot of devices somewhere, somehow connected on a network, and not necessarily the internet. It is a given that as we move forward with technology and produce more devices that are smaller, smarter, cheaper, we accelerate the need to have those devices connected and interacting with us, with other devices and systems. I'm a super nerd and a super geek, and I love the fact that, now I can go ahead and check the humidity on my grow up, make sure that my anatomically correct gummy bears that are edibles are ready to eat, and I can walk into whatever room I want, and my music's going to play automatically. Which leads me to talking about, how are we actually going to interconnect these things, whatever those things are. Just a quick recap here. I saw a burrito. I should have used a burrito as an OSI model. That's amazing. And what a mistake they were to get two Canadians talking after each other. So this is pretty much the first acronym that I learned. And I learned to make up some really fun acronyms with it. Still made up only 7 layers, although I like, the other 3 or 4 that was just presented. But in networking, we just seem to concentrate on the first 4 layers, which I'm perfectly fine with, and the rest of it kind of turns to mush. But it fits really well in the IoT model. And I put the data types beside the OSI just to help us understand this a bit more. But IoT transports, how we get information on the network, is typically made up of only the first 4 layers. IoT transports are typically never mixed. For instance, if you have a wired port, you have a Cat5 cable or Cat6 cable. It's connected to a wired interface card. It has a MAC address. It's probably connected to a switch somehow, and it's using TCP. But we don't typically have an intermediate step that is integrating BLE into this mix and then somehow back. But keep in mind that there is times when you maybe want to do that, such as encapsulating SCADA over a LoRa link. It can happen. It's fairly rare. If you are, just keep in mind that you're probably going to be mixing protocols. And if you do, that's probably an adventure on your own. The first transport that I'm going to discuss is this guy. It seems strange to use wired as an IoT transport, but we've been doing IoT for years. We just called it something else, networking. I know it's very archaic to discuss this, but what's so good about using wired as an IoT transport? It's globally accepted, except if you're like me running IPX, SPX in your house. It has ultra-fast speeds. You don't have to worry about wireless interference. Granted, there's other interferences that can happen. It already has instant connectivity on your network. You can use power over Ethernet to power your devices. It seems like you can do everything that we want to do out of IoT without having to build anything new. But it does lack some features, and these should be pretty obvious. Using PoE consumes a lot of power, which has really, has a really odd standardization and seems to be just increasing the power on the ports. You have an umbilical cord of 100 meters. You can go ahead and deploy it, but you're going to cause tripping hazards. Also, requires more power to do transmit and receive, and the TCP stack could be considered extra bloat when we're trying to send small amounts of packets. And we have these traditionally large connectors that, if we're trying to build these into wearables or, whatever else, smaller devices, they don't fit very well. I'm not saying that wired is bad for IoT, it just has its place. But we have much cooler technology out there now. And we're super nerds, so let's go ahead and move on. Wireless was such a better option for IoT devices. We already have an ecosystem built for this. We're having a conference about it right now. Everyone has them somewhere. There's no real licenses or patents to use it. Has pretty good range and throughput for IoT. Built-in security, even though we tend to forget about the built-in security. And we have the test tube mentality here where we don't actually have to have an umbilical cord. It seems like an easier way for us to connect our devices on the network, and it removes a lot of the disadvantages of wired. But we do have some drawbacks. Wireless devices still require power to transmit, or a lot of power to transmit and receive. We have contention, not just from other Wi-Fi devices. We also have other IoT transports that are trying to use that spectrum. Sometimes this turns into what we call a Wi-Fi dumping ground. It seems really easy for us to use the unlicensed spectrum selfishly. Instead of playing nice or trying to play nice, we just want to use the spectrum any way possible. Not everyone is doing that, but as Wi-Fi geeks, we should probably understand this and know the rules of the game. In Wi-Fi, we have a lot of different ways to implement encryption and authentication, but we always have different ideas on actually how to implement them. No two devices actually implement them the same way. And then we have the same issue with TCP. It's kind of stack bloat. And then also headless devices. Sometimes they're a bit harder to provision. However, in 802.11x, or is it Wi-Fi 6, or is it going to be Wi-Fi 6.1, 6A, 6B, I don't know. But things can get really interesting, and there's a bunch of things in the kit bag that can actually help IoT. We've had a lot about AX already. I'll talk about 2 very, very briefly here. In target wait time, the device and access point can negotiate the sleep time. How long can they wake up for communication? One of the disadvantages of using Wi-Fi is that it does consume a lot of power for transmit and receive. and trying to figure out things like DTIM just were overly complex and just didn't work out very well. If the device can coordinate with the access point when to wake up for data, then we can provide better battery life for that device. Instead of IoT, an IoT device spread all its energy across a 40, 80, or 160 megahertz channel, the IoT device can use OFDMA. The device can concentrate its energy to a much narrower band and increase its energy gain. By narrowing the band, we can focus, have better focus of its energy. And instead of spreading it too thin, we can go ahead and provide focus on that signal. And what we can also do, though, is if we do provide focus, is perhaps turn down your transmit power and maybe increase the battery life on that thing. You know, I grew up with Bluetooth, or when Bluetooth was in its infancy, or is it BLE, or is it BLE Smart, or is it just BLE? I like the word BLE because it's one syllable. It's really easy. It's fun to say. But when BLE first launched, it was horrible. You know, we were typing in apparently 4 zeros to get these things paired, and it was just a really bad experience. Then we came out with BLE 2.0, and that had some enhancements. And then BLE 3 came out and was trying to offload something into Wi-Fi and just didn't make sense, and we don't even discuss BLE 3 anymore. But BLE 4 came out and made some vast improvements in the transport. And we also have Release 5 that's coming out that has some great promises. You know, BLE gave us the ability to use low power, a small form factor, much better pairing. However, we still have some drawbacks, such as having to add your own security to BLE. It might be clear text over the air. You need a gateway to convert that conversation to something the rest of the network can carry. And BLE seems to be lagging a little bit behind in the transport game compared to other transports like Zigbee and even Z-Wave. BLE uses 2.4, but one of its benefits is that it uses frequency hopping spread spectrum. It was designed to be dodgy with Wi-Fi. It does have the ability to blacklist some channels if the error rate is too high. It also advertises on channels 37, 38, and 39. Advertisements contain information such as device discovery, connection establishment, and broadcast transmissions. However, on the rest of the spectrum, which contain 37 other channels, they can be used for bidirectional communication of devices and adaptive frequency hops for successive communication events. This is a quick spectrum sweep of 2.4 that PotatoFi helped me with. This was actually at Black Hat in Vegas a couple months ago. I think Ekahau was supposed to have, well, if you visit the Ekahau booth or the MetaGeek booth, you can definitely see the spectrum happening today. So what we can see is that the advertising is happening on 3 distinct parts of the spectrum, but the actual transmission of the data happens outside of that, and basically in Wi-Fi, in some of the Wi-Fi intertwined frequencies. We can see that the advertisements are happening outside of a 3-channel plan. Advertisements in BLE usually happen across all 3 advertising channels. In case one advertisement gets missed or you have some issue with that channel, the other 2 channels will be available. There has been some thoughts where we can actually only advertise on one of those channels, but I kind of like the idea of advertisement redundancy. So it's typically frowned upon in most scenarios. Zigbee is based on 802.15.4, but it is now maintained by the Zigbee Alliance Group. At first, it seems similar to BLE, has a fun name, has a lot of advantages over BLE 4, such as an easy way for manufacturers to interlock devices, native mesh, standard provisioning, security and device management. It is ideally targeted for home automation, but like everything, once the CEO gets it for Christmas and sees how easy it is to use at home, he's going to go ahead and bring it to you, and you're probably going to end up putting on the network somehow. So there's some things to think about when you're considering or forced to deploy it. Very similar to BLE in terms of advantages and disadvantages. However, instead of using FHSS, it uses direct sequence spread spectrum. Zigbee is made up of 16 channels. However, they do not advertise like BLE on separate channels. They can be sticky and end up on a single channel. Zigbee does have protection to handle the high error rates to move channels. Zigbee, for the most part, channels, they overlap with Wi-Fi. Zigbee channels are 2 megahertz wide as well, and at first glance, it looks like we can fit in Zigbee in channels 15, 20, 25, and 26. And even giving my poor rendering of flat-top Wi-Fi, it looks like it should fit. So far, so good. Everything should work perfectly if we smash these together in the same access point. Not necessarily. When we start putting Zigbee, even BLE and APs together, those channels that look like they could fit don't quite fit due to side lobes. Those channels could interfere with our Wi-Fi transmissions and vice versa. If you don't know what side lobes is, that's okay. There's a lot of smart people in the room. Go hit them up. They've written, 19, 20 books. What have I done with my life? This is actually was getting a little bit depressing. And also, MetaGeek also has a fantastic paper on this as well. There's also other IoT transports that do not use a shared spectrum with Wi-Fi, which provide great alternatives such as LTE, On-Go, Z-Wave, which operates similar to Zigbee. And Z-Wave was meant for home automation, operates in the sub-1 gigahertz band. And also LoRa, which was originally conceived as a low-power, wide-area network. It was really interesting. It was meant for long distance, very low power, small little bits. And LoRa can operate in different frequencies as well, but typically it's at the sub-1 gigahertz frequency. All right, let's sum this up with some tools. The most important is your big brain. You're smart. Use your brain. Use your knowledge. Help you design the network that is most optimal for your environment. Have a look at channel design. Ensure that you're designing correctly. Use the usual tools for spectrum sheets. Too much interference? What other ideas can you use? Is there a different transport you maybe offload this to? Software manufacturers are coming out with new tools and guides to help with designing a highly functional network. Use their tools. I'm a super nerd and I love looking at this stuff. Nordic Semiconductor, Adafruit, they make a BLE sniffer. It's $10 American, $300 Canadian after duty. Really interesting stuff. Go ahead, grab that. You can actually input that right into Wireshark and look at Bluetooth in real time. And really a challenge to all the manufacturers. Play nice. Ensure that we can interop with each protocol. Understand the rules of the game and make sure that we're taking care of a shared spectrum. All right, great success, guys. We did it, I hope. I'm Mohammed. I'm with the fun networking company Ruckus. Thanks so much for your time.